Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. The title of this morning's episode is A Dominant Start. I have to apologize about my voice. Being at the game yesterday, which was an amazing time, but did my fair share of yelling. I'm not sick. It is purely just using it at the game. But yesterday was a absolute dominant start. Currently, right now, it's 5 a.m. I'm about to go to work, so I wanted to do an episode. I was going to record it last night once I got home, but I was beat when I got home. And so I just wanted to make sure that I got this episode out before I went to work this morning. Washington wins 21-6. This is the first time in a long time that Washington has held the Giants out from scoring a touchdown in the opening game. And my goodness, was it a fantastic showing, not only from the team, of course, but the fan base. I took the Metro in with Arch yesterday. We walked over to the red zone lot, to the command corner tailgate, and it was an absolute frenzy. The game was sold out, obviously. The parking lot was really good vibes. It was great people all around. The rain persisted maybe until like 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock, and then it stopped. Then we walked our way into the stadium, and we got our Santana Moss ticket, which I left inside. I wish I would have brought that out and shown you guys what it kind of looked like. But it's a bigger version of the ticket of your old school football ticket. I have a picture of all the games I've been to up there. I got a Santana Moss one up there. But it was an awesome experience being at the game yesterday. We were sitting in section 135, got to meet Tony Franchise, got to see him, got to see Deuce, Glenn, Slim, Breeze, all those guys. Obviously, Hall was there with his brother Nick. It was a fantastic day tailgating. But to get into this game, because going into this game, this was obviously massive, because I was talking to Commandy's Nuts, Mike Costa. Obviously, I was sitting with the UK boys. Andy offered me his ticket. We all sat together. I was sitting next to Costa. And Costa had asked how I thought about how this game was going. You know, I was like, well, this is a really big test to see where Washington is and how they stepped off from last year, right? And what they did in the offseason, to see how things kind of meshed and kind of clicked. So let's go through this game overall, right? The Giants end up electing to receive in the second half. So Washington opens up with the football. Unfortunately for us, we go out with a punt. And it definitely seemed like things were not exactly to par like we usually do when we start out games. Typically, we usually get down the field very quickly. But it was about 6 plays, and then they were out. The next drive from Washington that made you feel really, really good was the Giants' opening drive on offense. It was a 3-and-out. 3 plays, 3 yards. That was it. And it only took 1:29 off the clock. That kind of gave you the sense that, okay, this is legit. And the one player that I will say that stood out early, very early, was Javon Kinlaw and his kind of influence into the game. He was obviously massive, and you have to give credit to Adam Peters and company and what they did with this defensive line, because obviously they haven't changed the linebacking core, right? Kane Medrano and Ale Keho were both inactive yesterday. So the 2 starters at linebacker were obviously Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. That hasn't changed. But the additions on defense, I know that Freddie Ham said this to me yesterday during the game. I know Scott Hartley also said this to me during the game, and I wholeheartedly agree with him. Dietrich Wise showed out yesterday as well. And Jacob Martin, Deron Payne, they all came to play. We have to talk about this for a minute. All right, guys? Because this is legit. The Giants' offense, they only ran for 74 yards in total. Russell Wilson was their leading rusher. Tyrone Tracy had 10 carries for 24 yards. yards, averaged 2.4 on the ground. Cam Scadabo had 2 carries for -3 yards. And obviously Russell Wilson with 8 carries for 44 yards. And then overall, they only threw for 168. Malik Neighbors was obviously their leading receiver on the day. He had 12 targets, 12, 5 receptions for 71 yards. That following Giants offensive drive was probably the tone setter of the day, especially for the defense, because they get that penalty, the Giants do, which gives them another shot at our end zone, gives them another set of downs. So the Giants essentially get 8 plays to be able to get a touchdown on us. And they held it tight, dude. They did not give it up. Bend but don't break. How many times have I said that on this podcast about this defense? And they lived up to it yesterday. That was right in front of us when they stonewalled them. That set the tone for the defense to kind of show what the Giants were in store for. And we got to talk about Russell Wilson's stat line. 17 of 37 for 168 yards. He was sacked twice. His QBR was a 25.6. I talked about last week not really expecting what the Giants' offensive game plan was going to be. And look, you got a new quarterback. You got some new pieces, right? But obviously, there was a gelling process for them that they had to get back into the rhythm of things. And Washington was making it very difficult on them to be able to do so. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not trying to be overconfident. I'm not trying to act a certain way or anything. But to be honest, the penalties were the biggest plays of the day for the Giants. If we're being honest with ourselves, obviously they had 3 sacks on the day, and credit to them. I do think that Jaden was just, I do want to give credit to the Giants secondary, because on those sacks, it definitely seemed like coverage sacks where Jaden was just holding the ball a little bit too long and then would try to navigate out of the pocket, and then the Giants were just suffocating at that point, so Jaden didn't have anywhere to go to work his magic. But like again yesterday at one point, I think it was the third or fourth quarter, I looked back to Hartley, and I was like, dude, Jaden is so damn good. Like the plays that he makes, because we have to think about this. Washington had 12 penalties for 89 yards yesterday, whereas the Giants only had 6 for 35 on themselves. Obviously, Washington was shooting themselves in the foot. But I will say this. That one Dietrich Wise, no, it wasn't Dietrich Wise. It was, I think it was Connerly or somebody's penalty. I think it was the roughing to the neck area. But there was another holding call. It was on Allegretti late in the game. That was atrocious. That I watched that replay. It was where is the holding call? He's blocking him normally. He's not grabbing at his jersey. He's not throwing him on the ground. What is the penalty on? And that was probably the one I lost my voice on the most. But that just extended their drives. But it just goes to show with Washington that even though they had 12 penalties, even though defensively it seemed like they really were getting close to being able, they didn't allow them to score. And it just shows a different change in Washington. And obviously going against the Packers this week on a short week, the Packers showed out themselves. They whooped up on the Lions. The Lions didn't have any sacks yesterday on the Packers offensive line. And everyone will talk up that Lions defensive line. Obviously, I think they're missing Ben Johnson. But to get back to it, there was many occasions where Washington was set back in 2nd and 15, 2nd and 20, right? Or first and 20. And they overcame those obstacles and being able to convert and get first downs. The first down markers is absolutely insane. Washington had 25. The Giants had 17. Washington split those first downs with 11 passing first downs and 11 rushing first downs. Setting the tone for this football team offensively moving forward. Running the football is a legit thing. And I talked about this last week on the podcast. Yes, they have Dexter Lawrence. They got Kayvon Thibodeau. They got Abdul Carter and Brian Burns. Brian Burns had 2 sacks himself. That guy's a very good football player. Give him a lot of credit. But Washington on the ground yesterday was something of itself. And that was something of beauty, rushing for 220 yards. Obviously, Jacory Krosky-Merritt scoring his first touchdown of the season. That play was absolutely beautiful, following Jesse Bates to the sideline, bouncing that out, and just having the speed to get to that second level so no one could come up and get you. Then the run at the end with Jacory Krosky-Merritt. I talked about that physicality in the preseason, being able to run through tackles, and he obviously showcased that yesterday. And I'll be honest with you. I think that run at the end of the game, that 42-yard run he had to get us out of our own end zone, because at that point, you're trying to liquidate the clock to finish the game, right? Because the clock is your worst enemy at that point. You don't want to give them any more chances, the Giants, to get back into that game. Jacory breaks that through, and we were in our own end zone. It was right up to where our seats were. He breaks that out right. That completely flips the field. It gives you more first downs. And honestly, I said to the guys, we need 2 first downs here to be able to end this game, because the Giants had 3 timeouts left and a 2-minute warning. And they obviously did that with Jacory Krosky-Merritt. I'm very impressed with that young man, but overall, the running game together. He had 10 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown, average 8.2 on the ground. Jaden Daniels with 11 carries for 68 yards, himself with a long of 14. Austin Eckler getting into the mix. He had one false start that got us into I think it was a 2nd and 20, which is not the best that's not the down that you want to get a false start on. You want to get that on first down, because that way you have more chances, right, to get back into it. But Austin Eckler immediately after gets that dump off of Jaden Daniels and is able to get and pick up the first down. The crowd was rowdy yesterday. They showed up when they needed to. There was times where the crowd itself needed a break, especially because, on defense, you want to get riled up. You want the crowd to be loud, and Washington was performing at such a high level, especially in terms of what we're used to. Like, if you were to compare what happened last year with the field goals, just in that sense, obviously they scored on almost every possession last year. They didn't punt last game 2 against the Giants, but obviously this one we did. But I know that there was rustiness to it, but just the way that the defense was performing, the way the offense was finishing drives with no field goals and going 3 for 4 in the red zone, everyone was on a high. And it was at times the crowd had simmered down a little bit, and we're back on defense. Everyone, we need to get back into this. But it's hard for them because they're jacked up of what just happened. They need to sit down for a minute. There was times where I was sitting down on defense, and I was like, this is not normal. I need to be standing up, of course. And obviously on offense, that was the case too. The newcomers definitely get a shout out for this game yesterday. Deebo Samuel, 7 receptions, 77 yards, 1 carry for 19 yards and 1 touchdown. On the last episode for my prediction for Deebo, I said 5 receptions, 50 yards, and I think I said 4 carries for 20 yards and a touchdown. So it wasn't far off. But if you guys remember what I said last episode, Dexter Lawrence, very good defensively up the middle, right? But let's see how they can defend the run on the outside. Let's see how he moves from sideline to sideline. And on those 2 rushing touchdowns from Merritt and from Deebo, both attack the perimeter. Force them to come up and make tackles. That one touchdown run by Deebo, hat tip to Bill for his block on that outside run, and being able to pop off Deebo. But also Laramie Tunsil, man. Laramie Tunsil, watch that replay again, where it's crazy. He's out there like a ballerina. As big as he is, he's able to get outside and then block that corner, which gives Deebo just enough space to the point where that defender is now knocked over to the sideline and has to dive for Deebo. He can't come in for a good form tackle to stop his momentum. Deebo, as big as he is, runs right through it, has the strength to stay on his feet as that defender's trying to drag his feet down to get that ball across the pylon. Obviously, you'd like for him to keep that ball in his hands because you don't want the fumble aspect in the end zone to be called back. I'm not sure what the rules are at this point. I think they've changed it. But the newcomers get a lot of credit because Deebo showed out. Bill, obviously showed out. Laramie Tunsil, I just talked about. Josh Connerly had his ups and downs. He had a holding penalty, I think, called on him at one point. They did give up a sack, but like I said before, I don't think that was on him. I think that has to do a little bit with Jaden and the coverage of defensively. And it was very obvious the Giants were shelling Terry McLaurin. They were making sure that a safety was over top of him. And there was one deep shot that Jaden threw to Terry that he completely shook the corner. I said it to the guys at the stadium. I was like, I want to see that replay up there because I want to see the route because he dusted him. Like, not dusted, but he made that when you saw it from our angle, he was running away from us up the sideline. You could see there was at least 5 to 7 yards of separation between the two. And then that goes to what I've been talking about with Terry all offseason, where he needed to be on the practice field to make sure they were on the same page and game kind of speed. And it's hard to do that without training camp because you're not really going 150% like you are on a football field on Sundays. You're all jacked up on adrenaline, right? And that play in particular, Jaden just overthrows him a little bit. And you just need to get back on the same page. And I think overall for the offense, that was a big thing. That they just needed to gel a little bit. But if you were to compare the need to gel between the first game against the Giants last season and yesterday, you can tell the big difference, especially in the way that Jaden Daniels handles himself. Very confident with throwing over the middle of the field. You could see there would be linebackers in the way. Like, how many in routes did you see? Like the one Deebo Samuel catch, I think it was like a 20-yarder that he had, or the Terry McLaurin hitch route that he ran for a first down. He's throwing over those linebackers. He's very confident with throwing over the middle, which is what some pundits and critics had to say about Jaden coming out of the draft, that he wouldn't throw over the middle. Well, like right now, he's very confident with doing so, and he's very good at it. And like I talked about with those penalties getting knocked back, they continue to overcome them. Obviously, the penalties, my bad, sorry, that was weird. The penalties need to get nipped in the bud. Then that needs to stop. You can't have double-digit penalties going against teams like the Packers, and especially a harder schedule. And I do expect that they'll clean those up a little bit, of course. But the newcomers in this, Dietrich Wise, Jacob Martin, Will Harris himself, the throw to Malik Neighbors in the end zone, which was to the opposite side of us on the away side, but it was on our side of the field. Seeing Will Harris come up when Marshawn is kind of lower in his defense of Malik, and Malik goes up for that ball, and Will Harris comes over and makes sure that impact takes him out of the back of the end zone so he doesn't have a chance to come down with that football. I mean, that's exactly why Will Harris is here. What I will say that I felt bad for Noah Igbinoghene because he was getting picked on. As soon as he was on the field, Russell Wilson, it didn't, Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Neighbors, whenever those two were on him, as soon as, because Mikey got nicked up at one point, so they brought in Noah Igbinoghene. They went right after him. And I felt bad because they were very hesitant to go deep on our defense. But as soon as Noah went in there, they were going at him deep. And some of them did connect. You have to give them credit. One of them should have been a defensive pass interference on our sideline. I'm not going to sit here and gripe about it, but because that would have been 13 for probably over 100 yards in penalty yards. And it probably would have changed things a little bit. But I felt bad for Noah because they were definitely going after him. And if we as a fan base look at that, just look at that. That was our starting slot last season. And this year, they did not target us at all. It was rare that they were able to pop things off in the passing game. Maybe that has to do with them needing to gel as well. Obviously, they were 17 of 37. But I think our secondary deserves a lot of credit as well. We had 2 sacks on the day. I think it was Dorrance Armstrong, and I believe it was Deron Payne, if I'm not mistaken, with the sack. Yeah. Those are coverage sacks as well. Our defensive line was all over the field. They were wreaking havoc. And speaking of newcomers, Trey Amos, man. Amos. However you say it, I don't care. He strapped City, dude. He strapped Malik Neighbors up on the go route on the outside, on the away side of the field. He did the strap City celebration. Obviously, he is legit. And he's going to have a big test this week against the Packers because a lot like Malik Neighbors, they're quick. Jordan Love is a fairly accurate quarterback. They're going to stress you down the field. That's their bread and butter in their passing game, to be able to hit you deep, then hit you below with Tucker Kraft. And I fully trust Trey Amos to do it. I think Marshawn Lattimore certainly looked the part. He had a pass deflection over the middle of the field that it was actually on our sideline, where it was almost like an out and up, almost similar to a bubble, and he just comes up and puts his hands in the way. It was kind of short by Russell, but perfectly just batted that ball down. And my boy Jeremy Reeves. So credit to Marshawn Lattimore. He looked a lot better than he did yesterday. We'll say that. Jeremy Reeves, that should have been a fumble. Absolutely should have been a fumble. Jeremy Reeves was not on the field all that much for defensive plays, but he comes in and lays a lick on that running back on that third down, pops that ball out. Bobby Wagner comes up with the football, or was it Deron Payne, one or the other. They collect that ball, and then they rule it incomplete. But it just speaks to Jeremy Reeves and what he does. And what Joe Witt has talked about with Jeremy, saying, I have to get him on the field. He keeps making plays. He's kind of forcing it out of me. That's what Jeremy does, dude. Credit to him for coming onto the field and making a mark, because that's exactly what he needs to do. Quan Martin was a force yesterday, coming up and popping Russell Wilson right in the chest. This team, I can't tell you how impressed I am. The title is obviously a dominant start. And the team will say they were somewhat rusty. Look, they were. I was talking about with my boy Donnie yesterday after the game. He said we should have put 45 on him. He's absolutely right. We should have put 45 on him. But that doesn't take away that they were dominant. They controlled this game. They made everything incredibly difficult on the Giants team altogether to do anything. Even on special teams, an area that Washington, I even said that they needed to clean things up a little bit, make some adjustments. Nick Bellore coming in and completely blowing up their receiver who was coming out with a kick return. He jumps over somebody. Nick Bellore makes him regret that immediately. That ball almost came out too. What sucks is that the ripped ball of Russell Wilson early on in that game, wish we could have recovered that one. Of course, I think that ended up getting a field goal out of it, so that would have changed the point differential to 3 instead of 6, which would have been insane. But also the Quan Martin pick in itself was horrendous. You know, you want that for Quan in that return for him, because I can't tell you enough how many awesome plays happened yesterday. A lot of times for applause, for cheer. We were all so excited to be there and to be there for that game. You can't ask for a better start from a Commanders fan, if we're being honest with ourselves. But to wrap this up, I did want to answer some fan questions that were submitted as we talk about this game. A question from James Bonato. There has been a lot of talk about the upgrade in our secondary. Therefore, I ask you, do you feel we might see a few cornerback blitzes or safety blitzes this season? Yes, especially the safeties. Corners, I would say it's most likely going to be coming from Mikey because of how quick he is, how fast he is. He really has a nose for the football. You can see that. But Quan did that yesterday, James, if you can remember the play I just talked where he lays out Russell Wilson. Now, Bobby Wagner also. We made Russell Wilson feel it yesterday. We were not going to give him the chance to come back like he did in the Steelers game. You can obviously see a massive difference between the two outcomes and being able to strangle them to literal death. They were holding on for dear life to not allow that game to blow out. And obviously the penalties were big difference in that. But you can see that with the confidence in the secondary and the way that they are strapping up those wide receivers, that you have more flexibility with your blitzes to be able to bring more bodies because you're confident in that those back end guys. So you don't want to. I'm not going to say that you would want to see Marshawn or Trey blitz more, just because it's going to put more. It's going to put more weight on the other secondary members where you want those guys in coverage because of how good they are in coverage. But Will Harris and Quan definitely will see them utilized in blitzes when need be. And obviously Joe Witt doesn't need any help with that. He called a fantastic fantastic game yesterday. He deserves a bow because he did a great job. Now, the question that we have is from Meast. Who had the most impressive debut? To be honest, I want to say Jaden, and that's probably it's really easy to say that. Probably the low-hanging fruit, you could say. But if we're being honest with ourselves, it was Dietrich Wise. Dietrich Wise was a freaking presence yesterday. 4 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 passes deflected. Or no, that's Deron Payne. And 1 QB hit. And Deron Payne, 4 tackles, 2 solos, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 2 pass deflections, 1 QB hit. They try to go to that Malik Neighbors slant route in the red zone, and it was a tight window, but that ball would have gotten through. But Deron Payne put his mid up, and it was a low ball, so he put that mid up and deflected. That was a huge point in the game, which just speaks to the bend but don't break mentality. Deron Payne, he deserves a lot of credit too, but we're just talking about debut and not being able to see them before. You have to give credit to Dietrich Wise and what he was able to do. Credit to Jalen Lane as well. He caught all of his punt returns, and that's their number one job. Catch the football, buddy. That's it. That's all you need to worry about. Catch the football first and foremost, then worry about the return game. And he did his job yesterday. He had 1 catch for 11 yards, was obviously on the field. So credit to Lake Lewis, a company who told us they expect Jalen Lane to be used a lot. And he did, obviously, yesterday. Laramie Tunsil, I think, deserves a lot of credit, too, in how impressive his debut was. But by far, I think Dietrich Wise deserves the game beer for his debut. He was fantastic. And him and Dorrance Armstrong, Dorrance had a play where he gets brought back into coverage and made a play on the sideline where he tracks down the ball carrier and tackles him close to the sideline. That just speaks to his athletic ability and what he's able to do. So hopefully he's able to have a really big year. I think he ended last year with 3 sacks, and obviously he started out with 1 yesterday. So hopefully we can keep that trend going. But the Packers this week, they're no easy out, man. So we're going to need a big game from him as well. Von Miller, I did think that he was going to have some pressures on the quarterback. I wasn't sure about sacks, but obviously he was a presence in himself. There was one play up on Russell Wilson where in his side of the field in the end zone where he's in his grill and hits him immediately that he has to throw an incompletion over the head of the quarterback, the running back in the flat. A lot of credit to Vaughn, and they used him a lot yesterday, not just in that AK-47 package, but you can see where Vaughn's presence truly does come through and helped his football team. Now, the next question that we have, that was from Meast. Thank you, Meast. That was a good one. From Jeff Miles. Great dub, especially for our linemen, but I definitely see things that we need to fix before competition gets tougher. What are a couple things you noticed that need fixing? Well, obviously the penalties you can highlight and say the penalties need to stop. Having 12 overall, you could have had a couple more, of course. But the turnover game, like you are creating pressure on the quarterback. The coverage is doing what it needs to do and being able to suffocate that offense where they're kind of struggling to get things going. Those are where those balls are. You got to come down with them. You know what I mean? And especially offensively, I think offensively it's getting on the same page. That needs to get fixed up a little bit, especially the passing game. They had more than enough abilities. They could have had over 300 yards passing yesterday. And it's just getting on the same page. Terry McLaurin, that low ball from Jaden, which it needed to be low because of how that defender was playing it. You saw the defender's hand dang near touched that football. He played that ball great. But Terry's just got to be able to corral it, right? And then that deep pass to Terry that was incomplete. That was open. That should you guys were on the same page with that last year, but that's that gelling process that has to happen. I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. But that's certainly something that has to get fixed and buttered up just a little bit. The kicking game you can't really complain about too much, but obviously special teams in punt needs to get worked on. Early on in that game, they almost came up and blocked it. You kind of had the feeling that they were creating pressure on Tress a little bit too much that you would be safe with. Like you held your breath at each punt that they were going to get close enough to get it, and you thanked the Lord when it did happen where they didn't rush anybody and they were more in punt coverage. But that one deflection just speaks on what they need to be able to do on punt in the blocking game to make sure. And then obviously Jeremy Reeves is the head of that unit, and he's going to get that fixed. He is a very, very good leader, and he's going to make sure that he gets those guys ready to go. But that's one area I would say that definitely needs to get cleaned up because it's hard to find the bad in yesterday with how dominant it was, but it's just normal football things of gelling, especially on offense. Defense early on is going to click and mesh more. That's certainly going to be a thing because defense, it's not really more about meshing. It's more about inflicting your will and being a presence and beating your one-on-one matchups. But that starts with like who do you have on your horses to be able to do that? And obviously we saw yesterday that the defensive lineup that we have straight up, you feel very confident in what they're able to do. Offenses are going to pick back up. They're going to get a little bit more on you. But for a start defensively, it's really hard to come up with some bad issues. The Dietrich Wise face mask penalty, I thought that was a little ticky-tack. I did think that was the case. The penalties, especially defensively, are a thing. I think Mikey got dinged for an unsportsmanlike conduct. A lot of these penalties really helped the Giants offense. They were struggling all day long, but those penalties were their best plays of the game. And as Washington, you want to find things that they need to get better on in light of the question. But to be honest, it's the penalties, it's punt, and then it's just gelling on offense. And it's hard to do that. I get it. But they did a very good job yesterday. They averaged per play 6.6 on the ground, where the Giants averaged, where is it, 4.0 on the ground. That is massively different than what we saw last year in week 2, and especially against Tampa week 1. So you definitely see this football team growing. And who you are at the start of the season is different from who you are at the end of the season. And if that's how we're starting, and if we can keep that trend week by week, this is a damn good football team, my friends. Something to be very excited about and to be able to root for. If they continue this every week, that stadium, I think the steel might break at one point because this is going to be an insane stadium to be at. If you want to see what insanity, what a bunch of 64,000 psychotics in the stadium, you keep playing the way you're doing, and they're going to keep showing up that way. That was an absolute blast. On third downs is where you make your money. I think we all know that, especially defensively. The Giants were 4 of 16 on third downs. 4 of 16. Massively different than what we saw from last year. Massively different. They did a very, very, very good job of getting off the field and getting the ball back in our offense's hands. Hat tip to the defense. I honestly think that everyone deserves game beers for this debut, especially Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and Cliff Kingsbury. They did exactly what they needed to. Cliff calls a great game, and he deserves a lot of credit for what he does. And what he did yesterday with using the outside run game, and it wasn't like that's all that we depended on. He kind of forced that in. And you got to think about the genius of it, where we saw Debo get the end around in preseason. You kind of saw that. And so I would imagine other defenses are thinking to themselves, that's going to be a staple. They're going to use that a lot. They didn't use it until the third, fourth quarter for Debo for that touchdown. Screwing with the mind of the defensive coordinator. I'm sure that they're thinking, when's it going to happen? When are they going to go to Debo? It happened at the worst possible time for that defense. Credit to Cliff for keeping that in his back pocket until when we needed it most to really separate ourselves. And my goodness, did they come through. We were 4 of 11 on third downs, Jeff. So I would say it's another area that we need to clean up. Especially the penalties kind of hurt us in keeping those short downs and distances. So I will give them a little bit of grace in that regard because they did have longer distances. But man, did we overcome it when we did have it. But the 4 of 11, you like that, but you would like it to be higher. You like it to be 7 of 11 just to ensure that the time of possession was very even. But if you want to dominate that time of possession, you got to convert on those third downs. And you got to make sure you're staying on the field for another set of downs to bleed that clock out. Again, apologies for the voice. But the next question from Tim Towner was going to ask the opposite of Me's question. But let's talk about the New York Giants. Like, did we barely beat a very bad team? Or are we a really good team that shut down another really good team? Or are we just to get lucky? Are we lucky to get them in week 1? It's a really good question, and that's something that that Mike Costa had asked me during the game, I do think that we deserve credit for how we played, because that they obviously need to gel offensively. They lost Micah McFadden, their linebacker, early on, and that was obviously something that was detrimental to their football team. But that was dominant from us. And I don't think that they're a bad team. I think they are a very good team. It's just they have their own gelling process. We saw this last year with our team in week 1, where everyone has to kind of get on the same page, everyone get used to each other. Washington being a very good team defensively. And look, the Colonel asked me last week, do we need to make adjustments to defense and special teams? I told him we haven't seen the defense with all the starters out there in preseason. We don't know how that's going to look, and we got to see it yesterday. That was a very good defense suffocating a struggling offense to get going. Very similar to what we did to Cleveland last year and what we did to Deshaun Watson. That made it very hard on them to do anything, and that's exactly what we did. Only allowing 70 yards rushing, those are numbers that like the Ravens typically or the Steelers typically pump out defensively with running the football. So if the Giants want to do anything offensively, they want to be able to run the football well. If they run the football well, then their play action where Russ is going to work and they can hit Malik Neighbors deep. We did not allow that to be the case yesterday. We strangled them to death yesterday offensively. I do think that we are a very good football team. You can see the different aspects, the different layers in which that we can hit somebody. Not only do we have Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt to kind of bust things open when we need it, but we have Austin Eckler, who has a nose for the first down markers, who does run through tackles, who keeps his legs moving with his crazy alien strength. But then you have to worry about Jaden Daniels. If you do give him a slither, an inch of an alley to run through in pass protection, he's going to get through, and he's going to be able to really hurt you a lot. And our guys are willing to block downfield, and so it's just a nightmare for defenses to have to contain. You can dedicate a guy over Terry McLaurin, but guess what? That opens things up for Deebo Samuel in one-on-ones. That opens things up for our running backs to be able to get out to the flat and move the chains. I do think that this was a overall team that we are better than New York. Not just because of what time it is early in the season. I do think overall that is the case. I've said this all offseason. The Giants go as far as our offensive line does. They're going to complain that they're injured up front. They need linemen. They need Andrew Thomas back. Obviously, they do. But the coverage in the back end was very good, that it forced Russell to have to do things. And if you have a tenacious defensive line that is creating pressure at a consistent rate, you're going to have a hard time throwing the football, especially with good coverage in the back end. I think we are a good football team that still needed gel, that made mistakes, were rusty in themselves, but you can obviously see the difference in the two. In years past, especially last year early on, if we had 12 penalties like this, the game would be a lot closer. The scales were tipped, man. I'll tell you that myself. The scales were tipped, and Washington was obviously the better team yesterday. And I feel very confident in saying that, Tim. Now, the next question from Tim. Which member of the team has the best nickname? Bill, Debo, C-Rod, Scary Terry, AP, DQ, someone else? Who has the best nickname? I mean, Bill is so simple and so cool. You'd love to be able to say it's Bill, of course. But I think it's Jaden with Jedi 5. He is absolutely a Jedi warrior out there, man. The way that he breaks down defenses, he understands what's happening. He gets hit and he still gets up. The way he uses his legs, he is like a Jedi, dude. And they don't want to see that guy. Like when you have to go against Jaden on a Sunday, you're like, oh gosh, it's gonna be a long day. I'm gonna be doing a lot of running. And you gotta dedicate a QB spy to him, which takes another defender out. It's a nightmare for defenses. So I'll say Jedi 5 is the one that I'll pick. Now the next question we have, actually no, that was not from Tim. The next question we have is for our last one from Tony, franchise. First off, it was great seeing you finally in person. And question, how good was it seeing the D-line dominate the run game? Yeah, it was fantastic seeing you, Tony. It was really cool. I was sitting like 4 rows up from Tony Franchise, so it was a pleasure to be able to see him. Like I'm weird on game days. Like I don't talk all that much because I'm just like inwardly excited. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm like not concerned, but I'm just very focused on what's about to happen. I'm very excited for what I'm about to look at. I'm thinking about all the ways that this could start. And so it was good to see you because it kind of took me out of that a little bit, Tony. So I appreciate you coming up and saying what's up. It was good to see you. And obviously, the dominance in the run game is something that, as Washington, we came into the season saying, did they fix it? And obviously, they invested heavily into fixing the defensive line. And I do think that the Giants' offensive line does need a lot of work. And that's where their team is really going to either do well at or do bad at if they don't get better in that sort of area. But Washington, who everyone was telling us that Javon Kinlaw is not going to do anything in the run game, these other guys aren't going to do anything in the run game. We literally strangled them. Russell Wilson was our leading rusher. Russell Wilson, at nearly 40 years old, was our leading rusher. What does that say about our defensive line? Obviously, even the coverage in the back end, you can give a hat tip to that because his rushes weren't designed quarterback rushes. That's him seeing nothing is open. I have to get upfield. And that speaks a lot to this defense in totality. I can't get that word right. In overall generalness, the defense is very good. And a lot of credit to Joe Witt and his game plan yesterday. Going against an offense he wasn't sure how it was going to come out and play out. We took advantage of them, especially in the run game. We did not allow them to get a smidgen. And that's something that they deserve a lot of credit for. That whole defensive line, they deserve a keg. Live it up, guys. You guys did a fantastic job yesterday. It's a quick turnaround going against the Packers. Get ready for it. Thursday night football, under the lights, in Lambeau. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be awesome. I'm very excited to see how we match up against them. Jordan Love is a very good quarterback. He's going to be more so on the same page with his wide receivers than Russell is. And hopefully we just don't have that many bad penalties to allow them to stay in that game and to be able to get over on us. Maintaining the lead is something that last year we struggled to maintain. In this game, we held that on and we strangled them to death with it. And that was awesome to see because they couldn't, it was hard for them to throw the football. Very hard for them to throw the football. And when you're down by 2 scores, 3 scores, you got to make something happen. And we made it sure that was very hard on them. Again, it was amazing to be at the game yesterday. I can't thank you guys enough. If you made it this far, you're a frickin' champion. It was great seeing the UK boys, man. Arch went out with them after the game to DC. He works today. He's psychotic. I don't know why he would do that. But credit to him for doing that. It was awesome seeing Andy, Scott, his son, seeing John Taman, his son, meeting Aled and the other UK boys. It was a fantastic day yesterday. You can't ask for a better start for the football season. Being able to be around family, brothers, and it certainly was a brotherhood yesterday. We took a picture, uploaded it on Twitter. If you guys want to go look at that, you can. But yesterday was a fantastic showing. Seeing the Santana Moss, his name, his number being retired. It was just a great day. It was an overall great day. I loved the show pregame. I thought that was very good. I said to Andy at one point, because I kept saying, 15 minutes till the show, because I didn't know what the show was. I was like, what's the show? Well, they come out and like the dance team starts dancing. And I was like, wait, is this the show? And Andy's like, yeah, dude. I was like, oh man, I was getting all jacked up for this. I didn't know what to expect. But the show was the video, and it was awesome. That got you hyped up. But I will say the Enter Sandman that they did for after the last touchdown on that kickoff, they need to continue that. That needs to be a consistent freaking thing, man. Everyone was jumping. I know Virginia Tech has it. I'm a Virginia Tech fan. I don't want to take anything away from Virginia Tech. But gosh, do I love that dude. It was awesome. It was such an awesome experience overall. Want to see that back. It was I highly recommend anybody. If you have a chance to go to a game this year, you got to go. You have to go. This is what you want to go see. This is what you've been waiting for. This is what you've been waiting 30 years for. You know, like this isn't like Disney with Star Wars, right? You got to wait 30 years and then you fall in. No, like if you want to go and get your mind blown, have a great time with fantastic people, go to the game. It was great seeing everybody yesterday. It's great to talk to you guys again. I love this football team. It's always happy to be here with a dub talking. And, you know, I love to do this. It was yesterday was awesome. Absolutely awesome. All right, everybody. We'll see you again this week. I'm sure that we're going to have a preview. We might have a preview video for the Packers. If not, we'll probably record on Friday night. I'll talk to the boys and see what we're going to go on with that. But God bless you guys. What a blessing it is to be a fan of this football team. Very excited, happy that I was able to be there and honored to be able to be there with those guys yesterday. Thank you to Andy. Thank you to Scott. I hope you guys have safe travels today. And, you know, as always, Washington football. Woo! We'll see you then.
What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.